The chain of command is done, is broken. That's how the chief of staff lost control of the military. So this article is an opinion piece by Yigal Levy, who's a well-known war expert and sociologist in Israel. He mentioned several incidents, specifics of what the Israeli army is doing. He calls these symptoms of the disintegration of the IDF's chain of command, which is far more severe than previously perceived. The commander of the Army's 36th Armored Division issued a handwritten battle directive to his troops, calling on them to take revenge on Palestinians. Obviously, if you have a correctly functioning military that is not trying to just all out commit genocide, you don't allow brigadier generals to put out memos saying, hey, just exact revenge. Whatever you want to do, you do it. He then continues, is there any wonder that when Bar Khalifa was ordered to move his forces outside of Gaza, senior army officials suspected that their directives were intentionally disregarded? So the people above him tell him to move his forces outside of Gaza and he won't do it, because chain of command is breaking down. The idea of chain of command is 100%, as this article says, disintegrating. Brigadier General Barak Hiram not only ordered his troops to open fire on Israeli civilians and blew up a Palestinian university in Gaza without permission, but also stated in an interview with journalist Ilana Dayan, right as the war started, that Israel's political leadership should refrain from any prospect of a political solution to the crisis. The IDF's chief of staff didn't say a word then either. It's not only the division commanders that are at issue here, but also the soldiers. The video recordings capturing the troops' actions, their calls for Jewish resettlement of the Gaza Strip. All of this goes against what we ostensibly are supposed to believe as we're sitting here in the United States or whatever country you're in. I don't think many of you are Israeli. You're probably not watching this, but whatever country you're in, we're meant to believe, Israel's just trying to get the Hamas. They're going in to get the Hamas, and that's what they're doing. And Hamas actually lives inside of the other Palestinian, like inside the children. And so they got to bomb the children to get the Hamas out of the children. Is what they got to do. We're told to believe, right, that they're going after Hamas. But this goes against all of this, telling soldiers to exact revenge, soldiers posting clips saying, talking about Jewish resettlement of the Gaza Strip. All of that is actually proving this is ethnic cleansing. For the most part, Israel's trying to refrain from saying we are completely ethnically cleansing this area. I mean, at times they don't, but most of the time they're trying. The troops' usage of social media to criticize the alleged restraint on their ability to use deadly force, their looting, and much more. So he's talking about all these, many of you have seen these videos of IDF looting, stealing out of safes, stealing various products. I brought you video footage from an Israeli TV report about the looting, except they were covering it in an almost positive way. They were like, look at this soldier brought home jewelry to his girlfriend. Yay! Yay, looting. And by the way, most of the things I've mentioned are war crimes. Exacting revenge on a population because you're angry with what some militants did, that's a war crime. Going outside of the chain of command to just kill who you want. Anyway, to continue from the article, they're looting and much more, which the Army's leadership finds hard or is reluctant to restrain. Several factors have combined to promote this disintegration. And here's where I both find what he's about to say fascinating, because he gives some points as to why the chain of command is disintegrating in the IDF. But I also think in a way he's almost trying to be like, if we just fix these few things, we could have a better genocide. Like, we would be able to do war better if we just fixed a few things. Anyway, he says several factors combine. First, the Army's hierarchy weakens as the model of mandatory military service crumbles and the idea of volunteer service grows. This is the moment when the reservists feel they have a right to speak up. And I actually brought a little bit of this to you a couple weeks ago about how there's a rift in the military where the reservists are viewed as kind of honorable because it's like they didn't really want to be, they didn't volunteer to, they're just on reserve, they didn't volunteer to be there. Whereas the enlisted people that volunteered to be part of this genocide apparently are getting not as viewed as highly in Israeli society. And I'm not over there, so I can't speak to it, but that's what the article said. This mindset, which constitutes the second factor, was reinforced by the exceptional circumstances brought about by the war. Combat soldiers, both men and women, who were ordered to risk their lives and serve, I, again, hate that word, especially with imperial militaries, especially with militaries committing genocide. I don't think it's serving. I don't think you're serving your country. You're serving genocide is what you're doing in this case. And so it should really be, they were in the military. That was a thing that happened. Kind of like these people were part of Charles Manson's group. Like they didn't serve in Manson's group. Combat soldiers, both men and women, who are ordered to risk their lives and be in Gaza for prolonged durations, not only feel that the burden of sacrifice rests on their somewhat limited shoulders, but that it's also up to them to save Israel from its failed political leadership and senior army command. About the failed political leadership, yes, this is absolutely a failed political leadership in Israel right now. Netanyahu, these far-right messianic lunatics, absolutely. However, do not let our government or other Western governments or other Western propaganda outlets tell you that this is just Netanyahu's fault and it would be fine if Netanyahu weren't there. No, it is an oppressive, horrific apartheid regime that has been destroying lives of Palestinians for decades. Don't let them tell you if you get rid of Netanyahu, if he's voted out, if that Yahoo moves on, then it'll be fixed. No, it won't. All these factors are intensified by the high proportion of combat soldiers who identify as supporters of right-wing and religious right parties. So, yeah, when you have a lot of far-right lunatics in your military, you end up with your military acting like lunatics. That is absolutely true. Let me throw in here, I feel like what he's saying is important, but it does need a lot of additions. The reason the far right fits so well in these militaries, both the Israel's IDF and the U.S. military, right? There are a lot of white supremacists in the U.S. military. There have been plenty of reporting on the number of white supremacists in the U.S. military, and I don't mean our systemic white supremacists in military. I mean full-on white supremacists in the military. The reason there are so many far-right lunatics in these militaries is because that fits with the mission statement of these imperial militaries. Like the mission statement of the U.S. military is to go to other countries and destroy them and wreck them. Afghanistan, Libya, Iraq, Yemen, Syria, so many other places over the generations. That is the mission statement of the U.S. military. So they fit right in, right? Right-wing, far right-wing lunatics fit right in to the mission statement of the U.S. Imperial Guard, okay? And similarly, in Israel, the right wing fits in perfectly. They're being asked to perpetrate genocide. They're being asked to go over there and not care when they shoot children, sometimes intentionally shooting children, but at least not care when they shoot children. And I'm not talking about the bombing, but shoot children because that's okay because they're going after Hamas and oopsie, a child got in the way. That's what they're being told. And so who is able to do that most easily? Who is already in the right mindset for that? Far right-wing lunatics who want to kill children anyway because they're different and they're different skin color or different religion or whatever else. They fit right in with the mission statement. So that's how you end up with so many far-right psychopaths. And the most psychopathic of these soldiers, both in the U.S. and IDF, tend to be the leaders of the others. I don't mean they're always promoted the most sometimes, but they tend to lead the other troops because those who are slightly less, and I don't know whether this is contentious or not. I studied some psychology, but I didn't study this. But I think that sociopathy and psychopathy are on a sliding scale to some degree. So you could have someone who's a slight sociopath and someone who's an extreme sociopath. In my view, the ones who are the worst end up leading the other soldiers. The other soldiers fall in line. And it's the same with our brutal police force here in the United States as well. And I've had ex-police officers say that to me in interviews, that they usually, a police department usually ends up getting led by the ex-military goons that are the harshest of the bunch, because the guy who's like, hey, I think we should treat these people a little better. Maybe if we catch someone stealing a pack of gum, we shouldn't slam their head on the sidewalk so hard. That guy doesn't get promoted, doesn't demand respect from the other sociopaths. So that guy is not the one leading the charge in any of these circumstances. IDF, U.S. police, U.S. military. Okay, so moving on in the article, the third factor is the politicians who disrupt the Army's chain of command, especially right-wing politicians who support the soldiers and officers' unusual behavior. The IDF's chief of staff refrained from restraining the soldiers. How could he discipline a reservist who has been serving in Gaza for weeks and decided to take a picture with looted Palestinian property, sometimes looted women's underwear, or voice a concern to the government? That's how the chief of staff lost control of the military. I don't want to bury the lead here. The lead of this is you have a highly respected war expert and sociologist in Israel saying the chain of command is done, is broken. These people are not respecting the higher ups. The higher ups do not feel capable of telling the lower level soldiers what to do. That is the chain of command. And this guy, at least, is saying it's all but gone, which is pretty incredible to hear from someone who knows far more about what's going on over there than I do. Just to finish up here, the crumbling of the army intensifies when it's clear to the commanders out in the field that the sacrifice of their soldiers isn't translated into any achievements. And to me, this was the red alarm of, wow, this is like Vietnam. This is soldiers, quote unquote, sacrificing. Some of them are dying. I mean, many IDF have been killed by Hamas. But then they're sacrificing in other ways: moral injury, emotional injury, everything else, time. They're part of a genocide. I mean, they're sacrificing their mental sanity, whether they know it or not, by being a part of this. And they will never be the same. They have taken part in genocide. So there are many, quote unquote, sacrifices. That's another word that we can argue about how that's a bit of a propagandistic term. But there are many sacrifices by these soldiers to be a part of this. And when they don't see any achievements, because what I think most of these soldiers don't realize is the goal of Israel is to just ethnically cleanse the whole area. So the achievements of let's rescue hostages, let's attack Hamas, let's get the Hamas leaders, all that's bullshit. So you're not going to see achievements in that way, because that's not really what the aim is. And I don't know what percentage of the IDF believes that or doesn't believe that garbage, that propaganda. Never underestimate the cleanliness of a good brainwashing. Anyway, isn't translated in any achievements, which can only be political achievements. And therefore, all they can do in the meantime is to wander aimlessly in Gaza and count their losses. Wander aimlessly through Gaza, murdering people, stealing their property, and count their losses. That is what the IDF is doing. And again, this is not according to some far left American activist newspaper. This is in the liberal outlet Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, by a well-known war expert and sociologist, Israeli. If our media were covering the fact that the IDF chain of command had broken down, that would be a goddamn big story, a massive story. But our media is not covering any of that shit, right? Because they want to promote the idea that Israel is doing right to some degree and just hasn't appropriately counted for all the civilians that happen to be maybe under the bombs.